In this video, I'm going to show you how to create coffee-stained collage papers 10 different ways. And the last is my absolute favorite, so make sure you stay to the end. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist, and welcome to Tune In Tuesday, where I share weekly art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in my art demos, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to my channel below. Links for all the supplies to make these papers are down below under the word more. And you might also want to check out my free 5-day online workshop, Collage Kickstart, where I show you how to use all the collage papers taught during Tune In Tuesday to make fabulous collages the very first try. So let's get into creating coffee-stained collage papers 10 different ways. So let's start by talking about supplies. So coffee stain paper works on almost any kind of paper. I've got some sketch paper here, which is a 75-pound. Love it on here, but I could also use copy paper, drawing paper. Love using it on Joggles rice paper. Now, of course, the main ingredients for coffee stain paper is the coffee, but you want instant coffee. So this is instant espresso, instant, just regular coffee. And what you're going to do is take this and mix it with water. So you'll see I have these containers, they're pink containers, and there's not a formula for this. I just put in, a sprinkle of this instant coffee, some water, until I have a kind of a dark consistency that I like. And some of my papers are lighter than I probably would want. I probably want more. So you have to just kind of experiment with how much coffee or espresso you want in your water to get the desired effect in terms of how dark you want your papers to be. Now, I've also used for this my acrylic paints in my two primaries, which is Phthalo Blue Green Shade, Hansa Yellow Light. I mix them also up with water, so they're very, very watery, almost like a watercolor. And I'm kind of going back and forth between experimenting with the coffee stain and the acrylic paint. The big difference between these, besides the color, between coffee and these paints is this is going to be archival, whereas my coffee is questionable. However, it makes gorgeous papers. And if you're doing junk journaling, or if you're using it for collage material where you're sealing the paper quite a bit, which I do. I seal my paper with the glue itself on both the top and the bottom, as well as varnishes and waxes. More than likely, the coffee is going to stay stable over time. But I am experimenting with both acrylic paint as well as coffee for this. And you also want to find different kinds of mark makers that you might want to play with. So I got two different kinds of skewers. This is actually a skewer. This is a coffee stir. These make great mark makers. I got some Arborio rice, but you could use just regular rice as well. I've got salt, coarse salt or fine salt. Bottle caps. I've got some homemade stencils. Regular stencils would work fine as well. I like the homemade stencils though. These are made with a glue gun because they're very thick. So I think they're going to hold the paint really well when I put the paint on top of this. I've also got a fork. I think I'm going to use some pasta as well. Anything that I think can create some interesting textures, whether I'm using the coffee stain or the acrylic paint. So let's get started with our first paper. Off camera, I mixed some water and some instant coffee and some instant espresso in two different containers. There's not a recipe for this. I just want it pretty runny. And you kind of know if you get the right consistency because it kind of acts like a wash on your paper. And I've got a piece of sketch paper. And I'm going to take an eyedropper and just get a little bit of my coffee. And just put a few drops here and there. You can see that it's really thinned out here. It's almost like water with a little bit of coffee in it. Then I'm going to get a straw. Now, the size of the straw matters. This is a very small opening. I've also tried it with a much larger opening. They both work. However, it takes a lot of breath to make this work through a large opening. So I prefer the smaller one. And all you do is blow. Now I'm going for as many little tendrils going off here as possible. And you need this pretty watery to make this work, otherwise you can't blow. Now I'm gonna let this dry for just a minute, but we'll put this aside and I'm gonna try the same thing, but let's do it with a little bit of acrylic paint. So most of the methods I'm about to show you are good with acrylic paint or coffee. And the reason I'm showing you both is because coffee is not the most stable thing long term. I have a lot of my collages actually have coffee stained paper in them. However, it is not necessarily an archival substance, whereas acrylic paint is. So I'm going to show you the same thing using a little bit of watered down acrylic paint. Same thing. And wherever there's a puddle, I know that I can blow and get some tendrils out of it. Okay, I'll put this one aside. Let's go back to the coffee one. And I'm going to take a little bit of India ink. And actually, now that I think about it, I think instead of putting it in a dish, I'm just going to drop a couple drops right on here. Woo! Okay, that might have been a little bit... Okay, that wasn't a good idea. Let's use the... I have more control if I use a dropper. Okay, and again, I'm going to blow. So I like the two of these together a lot. And I continue to blow until I have no puddles. We can do the same thing with our green one. So I've just gotten a little bit, I've mixed up different colors of my acrylic paint, and I'm just gonna drop a contrasting color on here just to make it look interesting. Again, this is just watered down acrylic paint. These two colors on here are actually a mixture of my two primaries that I use for all my collage papers, Phthalo Blue Green Shade and Hansa Yellow Light. So I just mix them up into different combinations to get two very different colors that go beautifully together. So for my next one, I have a piece of rice paper and a bottle cap, and I'm going to dip my bottle cap in here and just make some circles. Now this is going to cause some drips, but I actually like the drips. It makes it more interesting to have drips. And this is coming off kind of light, meaning that the coffee is kind of light. So I could actually put some more coffee in here, and I might do that just to get a little bit darker paper. So I'm going to let that dry and see what happens. But so far I like that. So both of the pieces that I made with coffee stains and rice paper were made with instant coffee. And it was just a little too light for me. So you can see the really light color right there. So I ended up going back over it with instant espresso, which is just a darker color. And that's that darker rings. And I like that a lot better. So you have to experiment a bit to see what is your own aesthetic. And I think this is an incredibly effective piece of collage fodder. So let's do the same thing with some acrylic paint. It's got a bottle cap. This is on rice paper now. And the rice paper does absorb the paint quite lovely. And just for kicks, I'm going to put a little bit different color added to it. And maybe also force some sprinkles on it. Yeah, that is quite an abstract piece of art there. And just for kicks, let's do the same thing on an old book page. Got my bottle cap. I believe this is coffee. Well, they do similar things, coffee and espresso. I love the effect of that. Just force some drips on there. We'll just let that dry and see what happens. And with the one on the book page, I did the same thing. I went in with a second coat of the espresso on top of the coffee, and it just gave me just a richer look. Okay, next up, I've got a piece of sketch paper, and I'm going to saturate the paper with quite a bit of water. There's little puddles on here. Then I'm going to take my instant espresso, it could be also instant coffee, and I'm going to take the little kernels and just drop it on here. And we'll let that dry. Now, to make this more dramatic, I could also add a little more water to kind of force it to run a little bit. So it's already creating some really interesting abstraction here that we'll see completely when it dries. I'm just going to add a little more in some of the puddles. The espresso does go a little bit darker than the coffee. So it's fun to experiment with both of these, but you don't need both to do this. Okay, I'm gonna put that aside to dry and we'll see the result. I'm gonna put some more on here. Since I've got some nice puddles, let's see what happens. Let it alone. And here's the final result. I let this dry overnight, and although it looks like there's still a puddle of coffee there, there actually isn't. This is actually dried. And again, I wouldn't use this whole piece like it is. More than likely, I would cut off a corner. Like this piece right here is a great piece for me for a collage. And even like maybe right there, like just cut up little pieces of it. Let's try the same thing with a piece of rice paper, which is highly absorbent. So again, I'm going to wet the paper down. And I've got some instant coffee here. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit on. Now, some of this is kind of chunky, but that's okay. I can just take it and put it in my fingers and crumble it a little bit. Let's see if a force of water is different. This is a stronger spray bottle than the other one. The first one was a mister. Now I've got some blue underneath the table. I don't know if the blue is going to get picked up, that paint. We'll see. We'll use a mister again. See if, I don't think it's going to make a difference whether I use a mister or a stronger spray. Oh, there you go. Stronger spray can move it around more. So this needs to dry. And actually, just for fun, because, you know, why leave well enough alone? So I'm going to add a little espresso to it. So espresso is a little bit darker. And then we'll activate the espresso with water. Just let this, pull this off to dry. And here is that paper all dry. There is some stain on the back too, so potentially I could use that side. But I really like this. Very pretty. This could be a very effective piece of collage fodder. So now I got a piece of sketch paper. I've got a fork. I've got my liquidy coffee. And I'm going to make some designs using the fork. The tongs, if that's what you call them, aren't exactly straight here. So they're creating some kind of interesting shapes here. They're not necessarily all straight. Interesting mark making here for sure. Yeah, I like that. Just reinforce a couple of these so they're darker. I like it. The next one I'm going to put on a board because I don't want it to move. This is just a MDF board that I put a lot of my collage papers on when I want to keep them steady as they dry. This is a piece of sketch paper. And I'm going to take a big flat brush, some of my coffee, and I'm just going to brush it on. I'm going to take some Arborio, I think that's how you pronounce this. You could also put rice on here. I like this large kind of pasta because it just creates larger indentations, but rice also works. You just get smaller impressions. Now, the reason I have the board under here is because I don't want to move this and move potentially the rice or the Arborio. So I'm going to let this dry. And here is my Arborio rice all dry. I'm just going to push this away and see what we got. Oh, I love this. Look at the beautiful designs. Very organic. Just gorgeous. Okay, I've got another MDF board. I'm going to get a piece of sketch paper here. I've got some espresso, and I'm going to liberally paint this on. So I've got a lot of moisture here. Then I have got some pasta that I am going to just drop in. Now, by the way, I could use string to do this. I could use dry pasta. So it doesn't have to be this wet pasta, but I just thought it might make some interesting shapes since it's thick. So this feels like a wild experiment using all different kinds of textures that you can find in your studio. And you really don't know what you have until this dries. But that looks like it has potential. And it's dry. Now this took overnight. Now if I pull, most of my pasta is already pulled off all by itself. I think that gave me, that also gave some beautiful designs. Very organic. Love that. I'm going to try one more like this. Again, this is sketch paper. Wet it down. This time with espresso. Actually, the last one was espresso too, I do believe. They're pretty close in shade. This time I've got some small pasta. I am just going to sprinkle out here and see what happens. These are little circles, which I think might look really cool, particularly if I can get the circle shape in there. Let this dry and we'll see the magic that happens. This one is finally dry. It took overnight to do this. So I'm going to carefully pull up my pasta. Oh, I love this. I love the fact that I've got little baby circles all over this. It would be impossible for other people to figure out, like, how did she get those little circles? Oh, I could make 20 more of those. Love, love, love. Wow. I want to try the last one also with some paint. Again, I have an MDF board. I've got some watered down paint. I'm just going to spread this on here with no concern for how it looks. Whoops! I think this circled pasta might look really cool on here too once it dries. But I got to get it all situated before this acrylic dries, which it'll dry fairly quickly, so I'm working really quickly. Now, some of this has dried. What I'm going to do is two different things. I'm going to take some of this, just drop a little bit of the paint on there, which will cause some droplets. So there is wet paint for that circle pasta to actually react with. And then I'm going to take my spray bottle and activate it. So now that paint will spread out and hopefully create some cool impressions with the circle pasta. Yeah, that's perfect. Let that dry. You can see why it's so important to have it on a board, because otherwise, if I try to pick this up, all of those little circles would move all around. Let's see how the one with acrylic paint fared. Oops. And with the paint, this is actually sticking to the point where I could tear it. Obviously, I just did. Where I am careful, I get some really cool little circle impressions that probably need to be a little slower in pulling these off. So this isn't my favorite. However, sometimes you need collage papers that are just quieter. You know, they don't have as much going on. So if I look at like a corner here, like this would be a really interesting little piece, little element right there. Like, so it's not a loss. It's just not my favorite. But, you know, you have to experiment to find out, right? Okay, this time I'm going to take some rice paper. I'm going to wet it down with coffee. By the way, at this point, I can't tell the coffee from the espresso. Could be either one of those. And now I've got some salt. Now, I wish I had some coarse salt. This is actually fine salt. Let's sprinkle that on top. And this one is dry. So let's just rub the salt off. The salt wants to stick to this rice paper. However, I am getting some beautiful designs here. Beautiful. You know, I'm going to try an experiment, and I'm going to actually paint on the back of this and see if I can get maybe something else happening, because you actually get something that will happen on both sides. So I think I'm going to paint on the back. So I've mixed up some very watered down acrylic paint. And I am just going to very lightly brush it on the back side of this. Or is it the front side? I think this is the back side. Because theoretically, this is going to come through. Now I'm going to try another experiment and just wet down the paper itself. See if that might actually make it work even better. I think it does. So we'll have two different ways here when we turn it over. So let's see what happens. Interesting. I actually like both. You can actually see the little salt grains that actually was picked up. And the one that was watered down, you can just see the coffee stains a little bit more. but I actually love this as a dark piece of collage fodder because it's showing the little salt stains right there. And just for fairness sake, take a piece of sketch paper and see if this does anything different. I'm feeling this is going to be a totally different effect because I'm already seeing really cool texture there. So this piece dried overnight, and now I just need to brush off the extra salt. So it created a lot of cells on the paper. So it took me a little bit of time to get all that off. And again, on the sketch paper, you don't get anything on the back. You just get it on the front. I like the effect on the sketch paper better than the rice paper. It's more dramatic. But with sketch paper and paint, so I've got some watered down acrylic again. I'm gonna just spread that on pretty thick. But again, it's very watered down. It's almost like a watercolor. And again, I'm just gonna sprinkle some salt on and see what happens. Whew. I already love that. Wow. That totally changes this. We'll see what happens when it dries. And magically, it's dry. And now I just need to scrape the salt off. And you really, even when I take the salt off, you really can't tell the difference because it's made all the designs and I can just get the salt taken off, but you still see all the beautiful cells it made. This is a definite winner. So sketch paper, paint and salt, or sketch paper, coffee and salt. Love, 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 and I'll definitely do this one again. Now, this one's going to be fun. I've got different kinds of skewers. This is a coffee stirrer. This is actually a skewer. And we're going to do a similar thing. Take a piece of sketch paper, put a thick coat of watered coffee on here. And I'm going to lay skewers, not perfectly, just kind of like different perpendicular lines here. And then I'm going to lay a book on top and let it dry. Okay, place the book on top of that one with a piece of deli paper to protect the paper itself, this paper, and take the skewers off. Oh, very cool. Love that. Really interesting piece of collage fodder. And let's do this with paint. Sketch paper, some watered down paint, and this time let's use the coffee stirrers. Again, I'll put a book on top, let it completely dry, and we'll see what we get. Take the book off. Deli paper, and this did not have the effect I thought it was going to have. I got a couple lines. Actually, on second thought, I actually like this, particularly this section right here. And it's quiet, meaning there's not a lot going on. So this would be a really effective piece of paper next to papers that have more busyness or more kind of pattern to them. I actually like that. It's beautiful. One last experiment. I'm going to take a piece of rice paper and a stencil that I actually made myself. This is a stencil made with a glue gun. And I am going to fill the holes with coffee. And again, let it dry. Now, I could also do this with paint, but I can't use this one stencil twice because it's going to be stuck here for a while it dries. And this could take overnight. So much saturation on here. I can't wait to see the end result of this. And this one is now dry. I let it dry overnight, and oh my, that is super cool. Love, love. So I found another stencil. This is a piece of rice paper, place it on top, and this time I am going to fill the holes with my watered down acrylic and see what happens. This is actually kind of thick. I think I'm going to add some water to it. Actually add some water right to the surface too. Another way of filling this in, I've got a kind of a sponge thing, whatever you call this. Let's see if that works. Yeah, this works actually even better. You just kind of dot it in, and then we'll just let this sit to dry and see what happens when we pull that stencil off. Do the big reveal for this stencil. Oh, wow. And I had a couple spots where I didn't have paint go under the stencil, but for the most part, paint actually went right under the stencil. Wow, that is just stunning. And I'm through. What a fabulous collection of coffee stained paper with a little bit of paint stain interspersed, but I love these. Now, this is the first of 5 types of collage papers that I'll be making that I will then turn into another mini series. So I've already done this 5 times where I take 5 papers, turn them into a mini collage series. So this will be the first of 5. So stay tuned for 4 more collage papers. And at the end of all 5, I will use some of these along with the other 4 to continue my Tune In Tuesday collage series. To learn many more collage paper making techniques, check out the links that are about to appear right here. And be sure to join my free 5-day online class, Collage Kickstart. The link to sign up is under the word more below. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would be deeply grateful if you would. And I'll see you back here next week for Tune In Tuesday.